let me formally introduce you. Hi, Scott from Kalibrated. Welcome to the Nexus, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to come on and talk about the things we love to talk about. So
Of
I
course.
appreciate the invite.
So I'm just starting out with this whole, I guess, political commentator broadcasting thing. The Nexus is my little brainchild here in Switzerland. So I'm in Bern. Where are you actually?
I'm in the United States.
All right, so that's why
Oh,
it's morning for you, right?
yeah, it's early right now. It's 7 a.m.
All right,
Yeah.
so usually I would start by introducing you as Scott from the Calibrated podcast, the map guy. I guess people know you.
Yeah.
But I thought maybe on this one we could start with a little personal round, which would give us a more detailed introduction, right? Because to me personally, even though I've been following you for a while, you seem a bit enigmatic. Like, what do I mean by that? For example, say you were a guidance counselor, right, for a school, and you had to recommend what you do to the kids, right? What would you call yourself? Analyst, influencer, content
Uh,
creator?
yeah. So let me just think real fast. I would say partially entertainment. I would definitely say that because I tend to joke and I like to put myself out there in a more humorous way. But yeah, I guess you could say analyst. I try to refrain from calling myself that just because I don't have any specialties like from my careers or anything like that. I haven't like I wasn't in the military or anything like that. So when it comes to military analysis, geopolitical analysis, I am definitely an amateur in that way. But I like to think that I'm smart enough to understand things and I can put things together. And so, yeah, that's sort of the angle that I come at it from.
All right, cool. I guess in a way I'm similar in that regard. I'm a physicist, and so for me personally, when I see all of what's going on and I see the solution right there, I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't do anything about it, you know?
Yes.
And so for years I've been talking to friends and family and I don't know, girlfriends and whatever, but most of the people around me are either disinterested, on my side in any case, or utterly unable to budge from their opinions, you know?
Yeah.
And so I thought maybe, I don't know, start writing articles and doing more publicly and let's see where it goes.
Yeah, it's one of the few ways, the way that you're approaching it, that I feel like you can actually convince people of an argument. Because it tends, in my personal anecdotal experience, when you're communicating with somebody, emotion usually gets involved. People's biases are overwhelming, and they just won't move once you say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
But if you can provide your ideas in a written form where they're allowed to add their own uh, emotion and context to it, I find that it ends up you can convey information a lot easier in that form.
That is well put. So besides the articles, I don't know if you saw them at some point, but I written two articles, one that summarizes the situation in Ukraine and another
Yeah.
one that it's tough to put in words, but in essence, I try to formalize the method that the most prominent political analysts that I know, in particular the guys from the Duran, that they use. So they use
Yeah.
basically a model of realism, like the one from John Mearsheimer, but they also combine it with psychology, talking a lot about the neocons, how they have no reverse gear and anything like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
since I'm more or less slightly read into psychology, like I don't know, a few dozen books on the topic, like Daniel Kahneman is a prominent one, like Nisbet and Haidt, Jonathan Haidt, just a bunch of superstars in psychology.
Yeah.
So what I propose is I take psychology and the psychometry, which is the study of how to create a not psychoanalysis, but a psychological profile based on your personality, right?
Sure.
I combine that with realism to get my idea of what I call psychorealism. That was just the second article. And yeah, that was very well put with the whole emotional part, because I guess this is something I'm not very good at. I'm extremely rational, and I'm like, look, here's the truth. We just first talk about the topic at hand, and only then perhaps we can let emotion in. But if you
Yes.
want to get to the truth about that, something I'm just not very, I'm not good at marketing and conveying these things in person, I guess, you know,
Yeah.
as you put
No,
it.
I fully get that. And it's just it's I get exactly where you're coming from too, because I do that quite frequently. especially just with my particular niche, which is the Russo-Ukrainian war right now. I would completely remove myself from the emotional aspect every single time I post something, every single time I am coming to a conclusion that I'm trying to put the pieces together on something. I have to remove myself
Yeah.
because like being wrong for me is I'm like a hyper competitive person. Like I've always been like that in life. So like being wrong for me and being called out for being wrong and stuff like that is a very
Hurts.
like yeah, it just gets to me. So I'm always like double checking. I'm always watching my wording, trying to make sure everything is as like factual, I guess, as possible.
Mm.
But yeah, I just you most people cannot leave emotion out of these conversations, and it
Yeah.
makes debate very difficult.
They also I also seem to have noticed that they tend to consider this like a football match. You're
Yeah.
either with one team or with the other, regardless of what it happens. Like the
But
referee does a wrong call out for your team and you cheer on. He does a right call out for the other team and then you're like booing all
boo.
over the place. Yeah. And so what I like to say sometimes when I'm talking to or debating friends and family is, look, guys, the only way to see the truth is to apply objectivity, which means the same rules apply to everyone. And one way of doing that is, instead of considering this like a conflict with enormous stakes and we're all in it together, whatever, for democracy or whatnot the current narrative is, just consider this as like a Napoleonic War. Like you're a third party observer far away, far removed from what's happening. And that's how you get the distance, right? Wow.
It's a very good point, and it's one thing that I've always struggled with, especially in this information space, particularly on the pro-Ukrainian side. On the pro-Russian side of this argument, the people are a lot more self-deprecative, and they self-reflect a lot harder, and they're much more critical. Like if you hear, like I'm in a lot of pro-Russian spaces, I'm in some pro-Ukrainian spaces, and the when you hear them talk, it's like I've never met a more self-deprecative people than the Russians. Like it's
Interesting.
unbelievable. It was like a culture shock to me, especially at the beginning of the conflict. I was flabbergasted. You know, I come from America. America's number one. We're the greatest at everything. That is always just the
Freedom.
yeah. That's the idea that is always being pushed, right? And when you hear people talking so negative, it was just like it like flipped in my brain. I was like, oh, these are just we're just different people.
They're
Like,
cynical.
yeah, it's a cultural difference. It's a whole different thing. But then on the pro-Ukrainian side, it's like black and white.
Yeah.
Like it's they're right, you're wrong. That it's period. It seems to be the way that all of the debates I have online go. It's just crazy. You present a factual, consistent, logical argument, and they, you know, whoever you're arguing with deflects or
Oh,
you know
I have the
change.
three. I have something on that. So it's not really a formal theory. It's just something that I came across when arguing, just like you were saying. It's the three Ds. Shit, what was it? Deflect, distract, or what's the discredit? That's the thing.
Discredit. Yeah,
Discredit, right? Those are the three, usually the three methods that come up.
that's all I deal with. That's all I deal with all day on my social medias.
But hold up, Scott. We're gonna get to that a bit more. Let me just ask you a few more things about yourself, such as you say you're here from the States. Like, where exactly from the States? So let me put it this way: where you from? Where are you now? And where would you ultimately like to be?
Okay, so I currently live in New Mexico. It's a small state on the southern border of the United States of America, right next to Texas. I'm like 4 hours from Texas if I drive, which I know is crazy. Is that weird to Europeans?
We tend to have a gross idea of where Texas is,
Yeah.
and I guess California and perhaps New York. So if
Yeah,
you're a
so
few
I'm
hours
we're
from
right
Texas,
we're right I'm right in between California and Texas. That's where that's where I currently living. That's where I was born. I've moved I mean, I've been all over the world. My dad works in a line of business that allowed me to travel a lot when I was younger. So I've been all over the world. I've been to China. I've been to Russia once. I've been to Australia and some places like that. I've really enjoyed going around the world. Where I'd want to be is a very, very difficult question right now.
my confidence in the United States is starting to wane greatly. And just how I see my future, I don't know if I exactly see it in the United States, but at the same time, the United States is not a bad place to live. It's relatively safe. You know, we get you get the memes about school shootings and stuff like that, and that stuff is a problem, and gun crime is a problem. But if you're not in an inner city, basically, like you don't have to worry about a lot of the crime stuff. I live in suburban America. It's not it's mundane life. So it's hard to leave a place where you are relatively well taken care of and safe. But in terms of where I see myself in the future, it's probably abroad.
All right. Do you have any specific location?
No,
Not yet.
I have I've had some thoughts about uh Thailand because I really like Thailand and it's pretty friendly to foreigners who want to move there.
You just want to
And
move in with Brian Berletic, admit it.
yeah, it's a good it's where all the bald guys go. It's a good it's also a good transition country. So you can move to Thailand and then you can move from there to other countries more easily than just moving out of the United States to someplace.
I see. So you said you're from New Mexico. Does that mean that on your weekends you go out into the desert and make some meth?
Yeah, there's that's the only thing that we've really produced here is the greatest TV show. The school where he taught, I went to that school for a year, and then I also played against them in American football constantly.
Really
So
nice.
when I watch that TV show, it's like, oh, I know that. Oh, I know that. I know that place. Yeah, that is
Awesome.
that is basically what we got going on here.
Baking bread.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, what do I have lined up next? Let me see. So you seem to very much enjoy what you do. Like you say it, and even I seem to have noticed, like in recent, what is it, like maybe weeks, you seem to have even more of a shimmer in your eyes, like a self-content shimmer.
Yeah.
And so when you became, so what made you, what pushed you to become a, let's call it, I don't know, content creator, entertainer, slash whatever, all the above? And was it planned or did it just happen?
I would just say I'm a information aggregator. That's what I do. I bring together all the information and I try to present it in a way that a layman can understand it and can apply it to their reasoning, right? That's because the thing about what I do in particular is that it's so hyper specialized and you will lose a lot of people who don't have the interest in it. Like, for my personal reasons, I really like military history, right? I've studied a lot of
Okay.
military history. I get really into that. Same with geopolitics. I'm really, really interested in that stuff. But for a lot of people, they just don't care. Like they talk about how, America is like pro-Ukrainian or something like this. If you talk to average people here, like most average people don't have an opinion on Israel, don't have an opinion on Ukraine. It's like they make it seem like it's such a big deal, but then you talk to normal people. Most normal people don't even know where Ukraine is on a map. So we'll just start there, right? And at least in America, they don't know where Ukraine is on a map unless, now they might because they've had it pushed in front of their face so much. But just pick any other country where a problem could start. We're so far geographically, culturally, we're so far removed from most of these places around the world that we just don't think about it regularly. It's just far and away, right? And then, so what your question was, how did I get into this? So I started following the conflict in Ukraine in 2013 before the Maidan started. Yeah,
Before it was
and
cool.
I was a very young man at the time. I was 15, I believe,
Damn.
when that was going on, or something like that. So I was still in primary school. I was and during we call it high school. I don't. Do you guys call it? What do you guys call like it's
I think high school computes here. I
yeah,
think
high
we know
school.
what it is, yeah.
Yeah, it's like when you're 14, 15, 16, 17, like
The
that age
final
group.
years.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was really not paying attention in school. I I never paid attention in school. The American school system is the wildest joke you have ever seen in your entire life. I don't think you quite understand how bad it is right now.
Oh, damn.
Like my girlfriend works in education. I used to work in education. The school system is tragic here. It is, we are not producing qualified adults. And so, oh my gosh, I'm losing my train of thought. When I came into, I'm just going to go back. When I came into this and I started following this, I saw a lot of the lies that the U.S. was putting out about the situation in Ukraine, and then I saw Ukraine begin to lie about things like the fire in Odessa. That's what really kind of sealed my my beliefs and I guess my biases on this thing was during the aftermath of Maidan, I watched the Russian speaking population get cracked down on in Ukraine extremely hard. And then, it eventually led to a civil war. And I mean, I'm not exactly putting blame on the Ukrainian government, right? They're in a position where they're struggling to deal with what the West wants, what Russia wants. They have this regime that was, in my opinion, put into place, and the whole Ukraine crisis. I'm not trying to say it's one side's fault or the other, but in the beginning, from what I saw, I cannot support what the Ukrainian government did, and then throughout the continuation of this war, 2022 to 2024 now, that has only been cemented. That has cemented my beliefs there. The reason why I started putting out information and gathering information is because when the war started in 2022, the larger war, I was on Twitter and I could not find a single source that was counteracting the people like I don't know if you know Rob Lee, Oryx, all of those
Oryx,
different
yeah.
all of those different accounts. Those were like massive at the beginning of the conflict. And it was all pro-Ukrainian. My entire Twitter feed, this was when Twitter was Twitter and not X. Anything that was pro-Russian was removed and people were getting banned and everything like that. And I was like, even if it's not pro-Russian, you should still be able to have a debate about these things. Like
Yeah.
it should not just be this information is factual, take it at face value, there it is, you're done. And so I came into the information space and I started putting out what I would consider slightly more pro-Russian, I would say more anti-Ukrainian information. I was trying to counteract their lies, some of their stuff like, the Russian warship, go F yourself sort of deal, like that never happened. The Ghost of Kiev stuff, like all the babushka with the pickle jar, all that good stuff. It never really occurred, but people were believing this stuff. And I was like, man, how disconnected is this information space? So I got on, started talking about it, ended up losing my first account talking about Bucha. I was just talking about it. I wasn't denying anything. I wasn't making any claims. I was just talking about it. Account got banned. And then I ended up coming back into it with a new Twitter account and a new Telegram. So that's kind of how I got started.
I see. Well, thanks for that nice story. It's actually fairly complete. I don't think, have you ever put this up in such detail in one of your channels?
No, I don't think I've ever really gone into serious depth on.
All right, cool. So we can see, I can see the title already. Information Warfare Pro-Russian, Scott from Kalibrated's biography.
There we go. Yeah.
All right, so
but that right there, right? That's kind of the black and white thing that I was talking about earlier, right? If you're not pro-Ukrainian, if you're not pushing a pro-Ukrainian narrative, you're pro-Russian, right? The New York Times is now pro-Russian, right? Because they're saying things that go against the Ukrainian
the
narrative.
Konstantinovka missile, remember that one?
Arestovich is pro-Russian. He's a puppet, right? Even though Arestovich was the one saying that we should fight and that, it doesn't. You go against the narrative, you get slotted in that way. I'm sorry to interrupt.
When I go and do my fair share of trolling online, right? And someone throws something like pro-Putin at me. I'm like, dude, even the ancient Greeks over 2,000 years ago had this figured out. The message is independent from the messenger. 2
Yep.
plus 2 equals 2, regardless whether I'm pro-Putinist, regardless whether I'm Putin's personal valet, or regardless of whether I'm a literal bot, like a computer script. It still remains true. And so if
Yeah.
you're throwing here allegations to try to connect my identity with my message, you're literally intellectually 2,000 years retarded. You know what I mean? We already figured this out.
One of my favorite arguments is I just love calling people intellectually dishonest.
Yeah,
I feel like
same. Nice,
I
man.
feel like that's one of those like little phrases you can just like throw into a tweet and it really gets under people's skin because they are. It's what you're doing. If you are being absolutist even in your thinking, this had to happen in this way. That for me, that's wrong already, right? Nothing is absolute, nothing is black and white, and yeah, it's just you can't. It's like you can't escape it sometimes.
So I don't know where I got this from, but I used the exact same sentence, intellectual dishonest. I think I might have got it from Sam Harris.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know him. I'm not sure. In any case, you mentioned a bunch of lies from the Ukrainian start, and this is Ukrainian side, and I think this is the part where we get more to the geopolitical stuff. Well, let me ask you one last one, because I'm curious about you as a personal question. Do you enjoy being a contrarian, or do you enjoy hashing out ideas in the form of a debate, like a verbal boxing match, so to speak?
Well, I think that's one of the, I think it's very uncomfortable for a lot of people. And so you have to find the right adversary if you want to actually make some progress and have a decent conversation.
Intellectually honest.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You have to have somebody who's willing to say that their side is wrong, is basically at some point in an argument, you have to be willing to admit that the side that you are defending, the position that you are taking is wrong. Yes, I would say that I love being a contrarian. I did debate in high school and then into college. So I was really, really into that, I guess, form of discussion. And I will continue doing it forever. I'll never stop.
Amen. I'm the same, and sometimes I question myself how much of what I do is just because I just love being, contrarian.
Yep.
All right. So I just wanted to mention one more thing about the Bucha thing, which you said, because I also researched that fairly extensively for my article. And what I like to do is a necessary requirement for objectivity is applying the same rules for everyone. It's not sufficient, but it's a necessary requirement for objectivity, right? And so if we do that, I like to do this thought experiment. Let's say the Ukrainians had occupied a town called Mucha, and then they left and the Russians took over, and then the Russians threw a bunch of allegations of, it's not genocide, but it's like, a massacre against civilians that the Ukrainians committed, right? I just flip the roles, right?
Yeah.
With Mucha and Bucha. And then what I do is the Russians then present, so I just show the whole list of things. Like the mayor of Mucha comes up on the very next day, I think it was April 28th, with a selfie video walking through the streets, all happy. There's no corpses there.
Yep.
All right. And then the Russian NGOs come in there, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, because one of them is based in London. I think the other one is in the US. I'm not sure anymore. And then they present a 50 and I think 20-page report respectively. And the reports, they don't have documented evidence. What they do have is they have a bunch of out-of-context witness testimonies. And then comes the smoking gun evidence in the New York Times. Well, in that case, in the Moscow Times, let's put it. Well, no, the Moscow Times is pro-Western. In Novaya Gazeta, right?
Yeah, the Moscow Times is actually pro-Western.
Yeah, Novaya, let's say TASS. In TASS, the Russians published the smoking gun evidence, where they have satellite images from like 2 weeks prior, where you already see the corpses. But it turns out that those satellite images are from a known Russian military contractor. In the US, it's called Maxar, it's called Raxar, as in Russian Axar, right? Finally, the Russians release drone footage, which is another smoking gun evidence from the same date as the Russians took over Mucha. And they show the corpses as well, but it's a Wagner unit's drone footage, right? And so then you ask that to a Ukrainian supporter, would you believe it? And if not, then you're clearly not objective, and therefore you have discredited yourself from the debate.
Yep.
Simple as that. You just flip, make it all symmetric. And if that doesn't compute, then you have objectively, it's not my opinion anymore. At this point, you have objectively shown that you don't fulfill the necessary requirement for objectivity, which is the same rules to everyone.
That's really smart. Do you have a post about that?
Should I make one?
Yeah, you should make one, and then I'll definitely boost that because that argument is very sound.
All right. Oh, well, thank you. I guess I'll have to write one.
Yeah.
All right. So that was just thought of mine. That I wanted
No,
to
no,
put out there.
that tracks fully. I will probably end up using something like that. If you don't tweet it, I'll end up using it. So
Sure thing, man.
on top of that.
I will write something out. I'll try to do it this week. All right.
Just spilled my coffee.
Do you need a moment?
We're good. We're good. We're good.
All right, cool. I have some for the doggo. Is he by you, by the way?
He's outside. Do you want me to get him?
No, no worries, no worries. If
Okay.
it comes in, it comes in. All right, now let's move on away from the personal, the touchy-feely stuff, and let's get into the geopolitics part. So I guess my first question was, why did you focus on Ukraine? But I guess you sort of answered that because historically, when you were in high school, right, you already started tracking that.
Yeah,
And,
I am really, really, like I said, I followed a lot of military history. So World War II, obviously, this region is, this is just like a copy paste of some of the battles of World War II. This region in particular, there's a lot of similarities, obviously, because it's in the same geographic location, and the scale of the conflict being in Europe. I mean, it's an important event happening in our lifetime. So that is part of the reason. Another part of the reason is I really enjoy Russian culture and Ukrainian culture. So like both of those mixed in, I just have a general interest in the region in and of itself. Yeah.
So that, I guess this is still sort of personal. You say you like military history. Does that mean, so I'm for some odd reason interested in military equipment, tactics, and strategy as well. Also history, but less so military history specifically. For me, I guess it goes back to Arma 3, a video game, which is very, very accurate. And I think it originated there. I'm not sure, but are you also interested in, the which kind of caliber can penetrate, which kind of armor, like the tactics, what do you use, battle groups, and so on?
So yeah, I would say I'm more in the realm of like grand strategy.
Okay, so further zoomed
Over,
out.
yeah, over like no offense to any autistic people out there in the audience, but I always say it's like the tank autists. I'm not like somebody who knows what APFSDS is going to penetrate what, I don't know that, but I can give like if you generalize the information a little bit more, I'm really good. So like I know the different kinds of tank shells. I just don't know what millimeter penetration those, individual rounds have, that hyper specialty. I have people that I go to for that information.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess this is one that I like to ask my guests, which you're the second one off, so there's not too many, but I have a few lined up this week. But how would you, like, now we're zooming out, right? Now we're considering geopolitics, not just Ukraine, but how would you, in your own words, in like, I don't know, 2 to 5 minutes, summarize the current situation in the world, right? The whole historic shift we're living through, the whole multipolarity, unipolarity, and here's the cherry on top, why should everyone care about it?
So I believe that we are in the beginning of what would be considered the I don't want to say collapse because in terms of like US hegemony, the US is still a very powerful country. I think that a lot of people get this very confused because once again, it's like a black and white sort of thing. When you say the US is weak in a particular area, people will assume you mean that the US is weak in totality, where in fact, when I say something like the US is really, really losing its sphere of influence in the Middle East, that can be true without the entire US hegemony collapsing, right? I mean, you can say that is a hit to the US empire, if you want to call it that. I just call it an empire because it spans the globe, right? We have military bases everywhere. I don't know how else you could describe it other than an empire. Just like the Roman Empire, just like the British Empire, they didn't call themselves empires. I don't think they did in the time. but they ended up becoming that. And that's what I see the U.S. as, and it's not necessarily a bad thing either. They were just the most successful, right? That's how they reached that point. Um, but I do think we are heading into a very, very difficult transitionary period where the people in power in Washington and Brussels and other European countries that are following the U.S. They're in this position where they're they have very old thinking. It's very 1990-esque sort of thinking, where the Soviet Union just collapsed. NATO is the strongest military presence on the globe. We have the strongest economies. This is the same idea that they have going into 2024. Maybe a little bit less now after what's happened in the last 2 years, but I very much doubt it because this sort of thinking is very hard to displace. It takes something very, very traumatic to change that line of logic that people have. Once again, U.S. is number one sort of thing, sort of mentality. It's pervasive in U.S. culture. We do not self-reflect. We do not look inward. We don't. It's just not what we do. We're hyper confident, and it's been successful for us, right? But when you start to overextend and things are not as easy to control around the world, other global powers are becoming into flourishing, like say Iran, India, China was already there but is growing. Russia is now trying to expand its sphere of influence in the Middle East and Europe. And you have places like Brazil coming into greater power. The world is the world that the U.S. can control is shrinking. And that is causing a lot of chaos globally. The U.S. tends to benefit off chaos. This is a line that I've said quite frequently, is that the U.S. doesn't often go into any situation with a plan B. Their plan B is chaos. So they have their initial plan. Once that doesn't work, because no plan survives first contact, after that first plan fails, the goal is create as much chaos as we can to then capitalize off said chaos. And it tends to be successful. Power vacuums. You create a power vacuum with So you go into a country, you say you overthrow a dictatorship or a democracy, and then you did so by arming rebel groups that then are in this power vacuum and then become a terror organization or whatever. And then you go in and fight that terror organization that you armed and trained. And that's part of that like chaos idea where you create the chaos and then you solve the chaos.
Don't forget pouring oil into the fire of ethnic divisions to divide and conquer also.
It's gone on forever. I mean, the Soviets did this too. You look at Ukraine. Look how Ukraine is divided up. You have Polish, you have Russian, you have Ukrainian, you have Hungarian, you have all of these different ethnic groups, and they did this because it's a very easy way to maintain control. If you have everybody fighting each other all the time about what belongs where and what goes where, they're not fighting the state, right?
True.
And so this is a common tactic that has been used throughout history, and it's a successful one. There's a reason why they use it.
All right, so what about the last one? Why should people care about it, like in geopolitics?
Why should people care about?
I'm asking this on behalf of many of my friends who are like, yeah, politics, I'm not really interested, and so on. And I'm like, fair enough. Like internal politics, maybe I get you, but there is a lot. Like, I would like you to answer this.
Yeah, I think that the biggest issue that what you're seeing here is you have people that are not aggressive in their thinking. Maybe not aggressive is not the right word. Combative. They are not combative people. So when you talk about things like politics, money, that makes a lot of people extremely uncomfortable, especially when they haven't, if they don't study it because it makes them uncomfortable. Obviously, that's going to make them further uncomfortable, right? They don't want to talk about something that they don't understand and sound like an idiot. And I fully understand that. And they don't like the combative nature because we've been talking about, it's this black and white sort of thing. If you're not with me, you're against me. This is a pervasive issue in the intellectual thought process that we see today. So, and I mean, it's just kind of the human condition, right? Humans like to invest themselves totally in something. That's why cults exist. That's why nationalism exists. It's a human condition. And so when people, say, well, why should it matter to me? I always say, well, first off, it's your money. And that's something that Americans really can understand, particularly, I think. Everybody likes to have money to buy things, right? And when you say, well, this is your money being sent somewhere and they're just going to keep taxing you and they're not going to audit themselves. They're not going to tell you what's going on. That's a huge one, is understanding what your government is doing is very, very, very important to not only your own safety, but to your own prosperity, right? Having a full understanding of the decisions that your government is making on your behalf, because you are responsible for your government and your government is responsible for you. It's supposed to be a symbiotic relationship, and it's become a parasitic relationship, in my personal opinion, for most of the Western countries.
So in a way, you're also appealing to their own selfishness, right? Which I
Yeah.
think that works very strongly in the West, particularly in the
Yeah.
US. It might not work for I don't know, places like Brazil, but I think it's a fair enough answer because I don't know too many people outside of the West currently that I interact with.
That's that cultural thing where I'm not going to try to convince, somebody in China of something because they have a completely different way of thinking. And it's also something that really ends up affecting foreign policy. And one thing that I always tell people is go learn as much about the culture of your, what your perceived enemy as you possibly can. It's one of Sun Tzu's Art of War, know your enemy better than you know yourself. Because if you understand how a adversary thinks, even if you don't consider them an adversary, put them in an adversarial position and try to understand them in that light. It's like the situation with Taiwan. In the West, we're always talking about China invading Taiwan, China invading Taiwan, China invading Taiwan. And that's a good fear tactic, right? That's what they're using that for. And it's not to say that China won't invade Taiwan, but I don't think China has any aspiration to actually invade Taiwan unless they're forced to, just like what I consider happened in Ukraine, right?
Yeah.
Unless China is forced to make a move, they think in decades and centuries. They don't think in days and weeks like the West, like Americans do. Like we're thinking right now, what's going to happen, and how do we benefit from that, or how are we going to deal with that? And they're thinking reunification in 20 years when the U.S. isn't an issue anymore, right? Like it doesn't have to be right now. It doesn't matter. But that is a common issue that I see in a lot of people's thinking, is a lot of the pro-Ukrainians don't understand Russia. They don't understand Russian culture. They don't understand Russian thinking. And I didn't, to be honest. I had been studying this stuff for close to 8 years when this war started, and I had never really talked to a lot of Russians. I had never been in contact with a lot of Russians. I was studying this information from just off news, basically. Yeah. And now talking, meeting, having podcasts and stuff, and really diving into the begin to understand the immense differences just in the ways of thinking. And it really points to a lot of the foreign policy issues that we're seeing, where, I think a lot of the foreign policy issues that we're seeing are kind of intentional. They want the conflict, but you can see how a really uneducated U.S. Diplomat could make very, very, very big and easy mistakes just because you don't understand the culture that you're dealing with.
Have you watched some of the content from Scott Ritter?
I watch him on and off. He's not like a go-to for me, but yeah.
Well, he keeps talking about the Russian soul, right? I think this bears on that. Well, just out of curiosity, why is he not a source for you? Like
just
place?
Because I feel as though he gets very emotional about things. He gets very which is okay. I mean, it's his thing. He's bombastic, right? That's his. He gets into those rants and he gets very tempered and stuff like that, which is fine. I don't think necessarily the information he's dealing with is wrong, but when you are so into
Entrenched.
this world, when you hyper specialize in all of this information, it's really hard to listen to people who half know the information.
Hmm.
And that's not to say Scott Ritter doesn't know what he's talking about, but when I'm listening to these people talk, when I hear them make a mistake, it's very, very hard for me.
I
Like
see.
a general knowledge mistake about like the minutia stuff in Ukraine. It's really hard. I'll be like, that didn't happen. Like this is part of my problem with the Duran. I love the Duran. I watch the
Hmm.
Duran all the time, constant listener. But when Alexander Mercurius is on talking about the individual battles and stuff going on, and this is all I focus on.
You're like tearing your hair out.
Oh, it's frustrating because I want the information to be getting out there that's correct, right?
Do you have an
That's what-
example in mind?
huh?
Yeah, yeah, I know what you're. Do you
No,
have
but yeah, and it's just like it's very, very difficult. And like I said, I'm a competitive person, and I
I
just want
see, yeah.
I just want to shake my computer and be like, no, 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 no.
So you mentioned, you also mentioned Sun Tzu. I don't know if I can share the screen here. Oh, yes, I can. Did you see that meme from Lord Bieber the other day?
Oh, which one? Let's see.
Let me see. Let's see if this works. Tell me if you can see
Yeah,
it.
that's this has been the U.S. since World War II, right? They talked about how there's that quote from the German officer talking about the United States generals
Wait,
and how they.
hold up, hold up. Just for those that are just listening, it's a meme of showing Joe Biden
yeah.
in a traditional Chinese suit, and it says, "If you do not know what you're doing, neither does your enemy." And then in the bottom you have a quote from Sun Tzu. Well, Zhou Tzu in this case. Oh man,
Sorry, my dog.
no worries.
He's here now. Come here.
Oh
he is.
hey,
Yeah,
that's
he's big.
that's the actual Kalibrated.
Yes, this is the mascot right here. Look at his back goes up onto the. He's a good
He's
boy.
huge, man.
Yeah, he's like 160 pounds.
So what I dream of by the year 2060, I dream of dogs that have been bred so you can ride them onto battle.
Yes,
Right? I can
I'm
get
all
with them
about
to
it.
the like they walk you, right? It's not you walking them.
You just have basically like a like a tiger in your house.
Yeah. All right. So where were we? Okay. I have another one for you. Unless you had something to add.
Nope, we're good.
All right. Well, let me just add on something. The whole thing about one thing additional to what you said, which I found gold, which I would like to add to people that talk to me, well, that I want to convince to be interested in geopolitics around me, right? Mostly in Europe, right? Well, there's several things. There's the economic aspect, which is Germany is going down the drain economically. Germany is the engine for European economy, which means your eggs are going to get more expensive. Your rents are going to get more expensive. Your car is going to get more expensive. Your kids will have less than you have. And all of that is not connected to some, I don't know, migrant policy issue or just whatever you follow on Instagram or the Kardashians. No, it's literally directly linked to geopolitics. So again, appealing to selfishness. And
I think it's the best way to try to get people to think, though, because if you try to appeal to, say, their better nature,
it's hard.
yeah, that people will find ways around that. I mean, you can look at the situation in Israel with Gaza, right? There's no reason that 23,000 people should die in 100 days of fighting. Like you look at Ukraine, 23,000 people have not died in Ukraine, civilians from
Civilians, yeah.
fighting, right? That has not happened. And you're talking about a much larger scale industrialized war, not concentrated in one city. Yes, it is an urban settlement, Gaza. It's huge, or urban conglomerate, and I mean, obviously it's civilians stacked on civilians, but that's why you don't use JDAMs on Gaza, right? That's why you don't, they're literally leveling whole city blocks with planted explosive charges, detonating like whole areas. And you know, you talk to Israelis or pro-Israeli individuals, and they just don't see an issue with it. And you're
Yeah.
like, how do you look at dead kids
You know what I
and not
think?
think
You know,
maybe I'm doing something wrong?
you know what I think one of the issues is? This is something that I've been writing about and I will write about more. I'm hoping to publish some books someday. But it's this whole cluster of things that I like to call the bugs of the human mind, right? Like one of the most famous one is, I don't know, confirmation bias. Or another bias you know of is, I don't know, I don't have kids. I assume you don't have either, at least for now, for the time
Yeah.
being. But once you start looking into strollers, right? And you see that one model, you keep seeing it all over the place because you have this bias that clicks into you. And we have all sorts of biases. Another one from Paul Slovic, who is another superstar psychologist. He evaluated the altruism that people are ready to put forward. And the altruism for one girl, like the story of poor Saraya, and then you see the little picture of the little girl crying in famine and whatnot, people are willing to give $10. You see Saraya and her brother, I don't know, Ahmed, $5. You see the story, the headline, 100,000 people starving in Ethiopia, people are ready to give $1 to $2. This is a bug. You have an inverse correlation between what you're willing to give with the suffering. And here is one of my main critiques. Well, obviously it's a bug. People will say, yeah, someone like Jordan Peterson will say, yeah, this is normal because you only have a limited capacity to care and so on. Fair enough. But we're in a 21st century, we're an advanced society. And if we don't teach in school that people have to do this bridge in their mind whenever they read 100,000 people suffering, that they play in their little mind cinema the story of little Soraya again and again and again for 100,000 times until it actually clicks and they're like, oh damn, right?
I don't think people understand what 100,000 people is.
Yeah, that too.
Like that, it's like you can't even process that number. Like it's so like it's not even like a million or a billion, but 100,000. Your brain is just not wired to think in those numbers.
Fair enough.
It's wired to think to about 100, and that's that capacity you're talking about. And I really understand the bias thing though, because that's what I do and I always put myself in those shoes.
Same.
With the situation in Gaza, I mean, could you imagine having bombs fall around you like that?
Man, whenever I have a bad day, I think of myself, I could be in the mud freezing with hypothermia in Krinky.
Dude.
All of my people around me dying, stench of dead corpses. It's just unbearable hell. And Gaza, I think what you're alluding to is, I think if I had someone who didn't care about it and I showed them my Twitter feed, right? And you see dismembered kids, gore all over the place, like missing limbs.
You gotta Clockwork Orange them though.
Yeah. I think that might work, but it's just such a shame that you need to go through such lengths for people to actually start their introspective.
It's crazy that you have to be like, look at all of these dead kids to get an argument across. Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Oh. So let me go on to the next one. What do you think would happen? I think this might be a big one, but I'll go with whatever answer you want to give it. But what do you think would happen today if the West had its way and Russia was defeated?
Well, I mean, I think that was sort of the plan from the beginning, right? The goal was not, well, so I'm just going to go ahead and preface this. What I believe that the United States wanted out of the situation in Ukraine was they wanted Ukraine to join the EU and then eventually NATO. That was the goal without a war. That was what they wanted. The coup was the beginning of that in 2014, and this has been a CIA cooked up idea since the 1950s. Use Ukraine against the Soviet Union. This is nothing new. This has been in the playbook for a long time. Ukraine is a very, very, very valuable little piece of land, both in its agricultural capacity, in its mineral capacity, in its population, and just everything. It is a little gold nugget, for everybody in Europe and Russia. It's a very interesting little country, or big country, I guess. And when the U.S. went in and the coup happened, and then the warm water port was threatened, so the Russians went into Crimea. This was the beginning of that plan
I'm sorry,
to
what was threatened? I'm sorry to
the
throw you
warm
off.
water port in Crimea.
Sevastopol.
Sebastopol, yeah. So,
Okay,
the
okay, yeah,
reason why the Russians invaded Crimea was because the Ukrainians began to threaten to not allow Russian vessels into the warm water port in Crimea. That is a strategic port for the Russians. They could not let Crimea and the Sevastopol port fall. Plus, Russian support in Crimea is extremely high. So it just kind of made sense. They went in, they took it. And after that, the whole Civil War, I don't think that was a necessarily a planned happening. I don't think that the West thought that was going to happen. I think they wanted Ukraine to join NATO quickly, EU and NATO, and then use that against Russia in the future to further, economically strangle them. And they're just everywhere, and you kind of isolate Russia. Russia did not allow that. They began helping the militias in the DPR and LPR fight. And this all kind of came to a head. I believe that this was supposed to happen before Trump, and then Trump didn't let this happen. I'm not a Trump guy, but I don't think Trump plays with a lot of the neocon and neolib playbook stuff. He has never been much of a warmonger. And I believe that if the Democrats, Hillary Clinton, would have gotten in 2016, this war in Ukraine would have happened a lot earlier, potentially. And it didn't happen. And then as soon as Biden got into office, what started happening? The Ukrainians were supposedly, depending on who you believe, this is a Russian claim, that the Ukrainians were planning an offensive into the Donbass region, trying to secure that, which would then end the conflict in the internal conflict in their country and would allow them to join the EU and NATO, right? That was the primary goal. And then if the Russians stepped in, the secondary goal or the secondary plan for the United States was a sanction regime that would destroy the Russian economy and force regime change. So once that failed, like I said, chaos has been everything since the sanctions failed. But the U.S. plan was definitely, in my personal opinion, regime change in Russia, the isolation of Russia, and then the, I guess, appropriation of the resources and stuff of the country if they could get a puppet
Like
into
the 90s.
Russia. Yeah, like the 90s, exactly. And get Russia away from China. Because China's the real adversary for U.S. strategic thinking, right? China's on the come up, but Russia needed to be dealt with because Russia would be a thorn in NATO and the U.S.'s side while dealing with China. And that's exactly what we've seen happen. After the sanction regime failed, after Russia was not isolated, China and India became one of the largest oil exporters of the Russian Federation. And now they're building gas pipelines down into China. So really what ended up happening was the exact opposite of what was supposed to happen, according to the U.S. planning. And now Russia and China are very strong. Iran is extremely bold. North Korea is now basically open relations with Russia and China, which was not the case before the Russo-Ukrainian war. Just recently, the North Korean ballistic missiles that are being sent, basically Iskanders, that the Russians had given the North Koreans the technology to build, are now being delivered to Russia. Artillery shells from North Korea are now being delivered to Russia to supplement their own supplies. And North Korea is getting unlimited information now from the Russians. Technologies, all sorts of different stuff. So what you're going to see now is the U.S., instead of solving its Russia problem, has now created a Russo-Sino problem, a North Korea problem, and an Iranian problem. It's a whole mess.
But don't you think nukes could have been flying had the West had its way? Don't you think?
Oh yeah.
In a way,
yeah,
I'm
no, I'm
rather
not
grateful to the power of Russia, you know?
This is unhinged thinking. Listen, this is not a good plan. I'm just saying what I think the U.S. plan was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, personally, I guess I owe a gratitude to the Russian administration for having taken care of their armed forces after the 2008 Georgia war, because I personally, I know it might be controversial, but I don't like living in the idea of living in a nuclear wasteland. You know, Mad Max.
Come on.
Mad Max is not that appealing to me. By the way, about that alleged Ukrainians wanting to take over the Donbass thing, in the article that I wrote, the lengthy article in which I summarized the whole situation in Ukraine, I did a lot, like it took me 6 months to write, and I did about a master's thesis worth of research into that, including looking up the actual decrees, going to their source on the actual Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and similar ministries, and I have it linked in my article. It's Decree 121/21, in which Zelensky signed, which sought, among others, to reclaim the Donbas region by military force. So it's a thing. It's a signed decree into action and put into action.
I think the only point of contention is, were they going to invade in February? I think that was the thing, is, were they going to invade, and was the Russian invasion of Ukraine preempted? And I like to always point, just logically thinking, why the hell would Russia invade at the end of winter, at the beginning of the muddy season? They went in at the most difficult time in terms of, you know, ground conditions that they could have possibly gone in at. Why not go in November? Why not go in May? You know, when the ground is hard. They didn't. They chose the exact worst time of year to get involved in a war in Ukraine. And I mean, this is history. The Germans were stuck in this part of the world multiple times. You know, you see tigers dug into the mud and stuff like that. So this is nothing new, and the Russians know about it. So the invasion of Ukraine was not well timed by the Russians, and that's what makes me think that it was forced.
Well, if ever it helps, I also looked up the whole OSCE record, and they actually do record like a 10 to 15-fold spike of shelling on the very date of, I think, 22nd or 24th of February.
But then you get, you know, the people that would say, well, what if they were just responding to increased shelling from the Russians? So, you know, it's just bias.
This is not science in this. I mean, you can use a scientific method and say, here's my probability estimate, and it's clearly high that the Russians did what they're saying they did. Yeah. But you don't know.
I haven't really seen the Russians throughout this entire thing really, like, they do lie about certain things,
but they lie by omission.
They never lie. They're always extremely honest. You hear Lavrov talking, you hear Putin talking. They always say exactly what they're going to do, and then if the situation changes, then they tell you that the situation has changed. And that Putin was just recently quoted as saying, you know, the Ukrainian counteroffensive failed, and if this continues, the question of Ukrainian state, or the position of Ukrainian statehood, comes into question.
Yeah.
Right. That is a monumental statement that came out from Putin that nobody has even touched on. I mean, maybe the Duran has. You know, I haven't seen them exactly talk about it. But that is a monumental thing for Putin to say. Yeah. If this continues, Ukraine as a state is now in question. I mean, that should just tell you everything. Hey, stop fighting, negotiate, and the Ukrainian state will exist. Yeah, that's what that means.
There's one more thing I like to layer upon that, is that for me personally, I had, I think one of my sources for where I started doing the critical thinking, the whole critical thinking gimmick, which I guess is now part of my personality, is philosophy. And we were told to enlarge our vocabulary and use our words carefully. Yes. And so what the West does not seem to get, because the West is so hyper-focused on how do I manipulate my counterpart, how do I sugarcoat this, how do I best communicate this. They're trying to read between the line of Putin, and they're clearly jumping the gun, being like, he wants to conquer it. See, I told you all along. And I'm like, if that was me, and I say the statehood is in danger, I mean the statehood is in danger. There's no in between the lines. There's no, I want to actually conquer you, so here's my euphemizing it and sugarcoating it. No, I actually literally mean the statehood is in danger. You know what I mean? It's so frustrating sometimes how people try to overinterpret you.
Yes, and that is a huge thing. Well, that's the thing in the West, right? Because every time you hear something from the government, you assume it's a lie. right? That's like the first thing that comes into your head. You assume it's a lie. So, and this is another cultural issue as well, that not understanding the opposing culture. The Russians tell you exactly what they're going to do. They do not. It's very. It can sometimes be a little ominous, or not exactly stated openly, but there's not a lot of reading between the lines that you have to do. And it's just that's the only thing that you do in the United States, is try to read between the lines, because you're not being told the right thing ever. Like all we do is read between lines. And so when we hear a politician say something like Ukrainian statehood is going to be in question, we're like, oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? Instead of just taking it at face value for exactly what it means.
Yeah. So I don't know how much longer you have. I think we're approaching the hour. I have
unlimited time as long as you want to go.
Let me see what I still have here. Well, okay, let's just go with the next one that I wanted to put forward to you, and then let's take it from there. So we talked a little before about the whole online trolling thing, about the extremism that let's call them Ukrabots, or pro-Ukrainians. They claim to be pro-Ukrainian, but they don't really consider what's good for Ukraine, but let's just call them pro-Ukrainian for the sake of the argument.
The flag wavers.
The flag wavers, yeah. We talked about them and their extremism and how they consider the whole thing like a black or white sports game. And I recently stumbled upon a person in the gym. For anonymity purposes, let's call him Carl. And he did actually, I mean, from all I could say, from all I could judge, he did seem like a well-educated, smart person. He was from Georgia, but he came long after the war, so it's not like he fled from the war.
Yeah.
Yet he would not budge a millimeter from his position. And what I noticed is that whenever I pointed out an internal inconsistency in his stance, let alone like an inconsistency in his own narrative, let alone incongruities with the facts on the ground, he would not budge. And if the conversation continued, he would just switch to another topic. Like, he wouldn't say, okay, maybe this doesn't make sense. He would just say, yeah, but, right? Yeah. And maybe it's my way of debating, because I like to be, I guess I'm not very emotionally smart when I debate, because I really want to hash out the idea and I want to think about how this would, but I never attack the person directly, right? I remain intellectually honest to the extent that I can, but I never attack any person. I never discredit a person. I'm never, I think I did at some point when I repeated a mainstream narrative, formulated like shaking my head, right? Like with disrespect. But I immediately apologized for that because he pointed it out. So like even at the heat of the debate, I was like, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry, right? But in any case, he would not budge, he would change. And like just as one example, what I mean by pointing out like an incongruity, we were talking about the whole domino theory, right? Like Russia wants to conquer Ukraine. They wanted to conquer Ukraine from the beginning, right? And then they wanted to go to the Baltics and Moldova. And I was like, look, no matter whom you ask, you can ask the Bundeswehr, you can ask West Point Academy, you can ask the French, you can ask historians. Whenever you go into some place and you're the invader, you need a numbers advantage of at least 3, if not 4 to 1. Yes. It doesn't matter which year, it doesn't matter if you're going by horse or by tanks. An example is the Germans, when they invaded Poland, they came with 1.5 million from the east, from the west, while the Soviets came with about 700,000 from the east. All that while having massive technological superiority, as the Poles did not even have tanks. The best they had was a
cavalry charging.
Exactly, they were going in with the horses. And so the Russians, when they invaded Ukraine had about 200,000 to 300,000 active personnel, 700,000 reservists standing by. The Russians came in with 160,000 plus some 30,000 Wagnerites and Belarusians and Ahmed people and so on. It would take 900,000 paratroopers or similar alone to take Kiev, which is a 4 million inhabitants town. So especially considering the second this happened, they raided the prisons and they began mobilization immediately. And they armed their civilians. Remember that one?
And they just handed out guns on the streets.
Exactly. So the whole argument that Russia wants to conquer Ukraine is not just wrong. It is blatantly absurd, and that's not my opinion, that's numbers speaking. And then we can also get into the Minsk I, Minsk II, the March-April agreement, and none of them entailed territory other than Crimea. He
And
would
and
not. Yeah.
and the and when you talk to people about this, they don't seem to understand. They think it was some sort of Russian ignorance that they went in with 200,000 men, against a much bigger army, a much bigger defensive army. And honestly, in totality, I'm surprised with how much the Russians actually
Achieved. Yeah.
It was, I mean, they got Kharkov Oblast, or a huge part of it. They got all of the LPR basically almost instantly up to Severodonetsk, Lysychansk. They got Kherson, Zaporozhye without a fight, which is wild. That they just walked across from Crimea, and then they pushed all the way down and had Kiev in a very, very difficult position, and then they held that for over like 2 months with 180,000 strong army. Like
There were
that
just
is
40,000 around Kiev, by the way.
yeah, and just 40,000 around Kiev, and Kiev was one of the most defended areas. And really, it was. I mean, when Mark Milley says, 3 days to Kiev falls, basically 72 hours, right? That is a real assessment based off of what we saw. If the Russians actually invaded with the intention that the West, made it seem like, and if the Russians would, I mean, oh man, if the Russians would have had like the FPV drones and Lancets at the time, it would have been, I mean, that is a very realistic target, right? And also, I imagine the U.S. assessments of the Russian invasion involved Gulf War style strikes on infrastructure and stuff like that.
Yeah, on bridges, on power plants, on water
just didn't
cleaning
happen,
facilities.
right?
Yeah.
If the U.S. would have invaded, Ukraine would not have internet, electricity, sewage. They would not have any of that.
But yeah,
So that's
so that was just an example with the whole narrative of the domino theory that Russia wanted to conquer, because that's what dictators do, right? They just wake up one morning. In any case, so I pointed it out to him. He had no trouble with any of the facts because I think he knew about the 200,000 number. He knew about the the numbers and so on. But what was very puzzling to me is when I put an argument forward and someone comes with me and tells me, look, these numbers just don't match at all. Before I move to any other argument, I say, the least that I could say in the context of intellectual honesty is like, whoa, I was not aware of that. I can't just take you at face value here and just say you're right, but I will have to look into it. And if you're right, I will probably have to change my position.
Yes.
That's the very least that intellectual honesty demands. But these people never do that. And so my question to you is, do you have any inside information of how to deal with these people?
Usually, okay, so in my personal experience, the way that this goes is somebody makes a claim. Yeah, somebody makes a claim. Are you talking about in person or online?
In person. In person first.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in my personal experience, somebody will make a claim. And the way that I approach most people, especially, I don't talk in person with a lot of people who study or pay attention to this stuff as much as I do, or as much as you do, or, there's not a lot of us out there. We're kind of a niche group. And so when I'm talking to people, I try to ease them into the ideas that I'm proposing, right? I try to show them a minor inconsistency and flaw, and then expand upon that instead of laying all of my information on them. Because if they don't follow the conflict, if they don't follow geopolitics, they're going to not have any idea what you're talking about. So you can't get into minutia. You have to keep it very general and broad. And really, you have to play off of the own inconsistencies that they see in their own argument. That's where you have to target, in my personal opinion, when you're trying to convince somebody of something, because nobody fully believes in what they believe, right? There always is some point. I do this often in religious debates. There is always some point where people question the idea of God. It's just something that humans do, right? Even if you believe in God fully, you still have this idea of, why would God do that, right? That's still something that's in the back of people's minds. And so the reason I bring that up is I'm trying to convey that same idea for any belief that anybody has. The US is number one, right? Well, are they? Because here's some education statistics. Here's some quality of life statistics, right? Like here you can dissuade people based off of certain information that they already fully understand about the place that they live, the belief that they hold. And that's how I always go about it is I try to find that little, I guess you would say like in a blanket, it's like a little unravel, like a little fray of a blanket. And then if you pull on that thread, you might actually be able to dig into some of the inconsistencies in their arguments.
Okay. Okay. So it's rather meticulous in that sense. Nice.
Because if you just if you say, no, you're wrong, here's this information, people's brains just kind of shut down to that. They just,
Don't forget the little insult there.
yeah. Always. That's what I was going to say is, are we on Twitter or are we in real life? Real life, I'll always like.
So let's say on Twitter then, how do you deal with them online?
Okay,
on
so
Twitter specifically, not online.
am I dealing with somebody who can actually have a debate, or am I dealing with somebody who's completely shut down?
Give them the benefit of the doubt. It's a new person who's
If
trolling,
it's a new,
attacking you.
I fully am willing to have a full, honest, very, very pleasant conversation with them. I have a lot of pro-Ukrainian accounts that are in my DMs, constantly talking to me, asking me questions about the situation in Ukraine, what I think. They disagree with me quite often, but I have great conversations. A lot of the more philosophical people in the information space, a lot of the more, I guess, just higher education based people, or people who at least can verbally communicate at a high level, I can usually have a decent conversation with them. Even if we disagree at the end, we say, I think you're wrong. I'll have a full conversation with them. If it is somebody who is completely shut down to any outside ideas, they think they're right, then I just tease them, because there's just
tease or block. It's not worth your time, right?
Yeah, tease. I really don't block a lot of people. The only people I block are just, it's like people who post gore, like for the sake of posting gore. Like anytime I post a Ukrainian tank getting blown up or something like that, I'll get 30 Russians with grenades getting dropped on them and stuff in my thing. And I'm like, what kind of weird cope is this? Like, you can't look at information, like you can't see a destroyed Ukrainian tank and not be like, oh, I'm going to go show him that Russians are dying. It's like, yeah, I know, I see it all. I've seen
That's
this
the whole sports team thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a it's like there's a scoreboard and you're keeping track. It's like, nope, these are just people dying, and you're just celebrating it in a weird way, and you think that you're getting at me, even though I follow thousands of Russian and Ukrainian telegrams and I see literally every single piece of combat footage from this war.
So I used to be, I guess I started on a platform which it has opened my eyes much more about it, which is 9gag. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Are you? Yeah. So it's extraordinary right wing. It's very fascist. It's very stupid. Like the overall comments in there are stupid. Sometimes actually funny, I must say. Yeah. But it already sort of opened my eyes during COVID, because during COVID I was more or less at home for the time of the lockdowns at least. And I started posting because already towards the end of 2020, maybe 2021, we had one study from the US, one study from the UK showing that neither of the vaccines, AstraZeneca or Moderna, stopped the virus, prevented you from catching the virus, nor did it prevent you from giving it further. And back then, the narratives is we have to stop the virus, which only then softly progressed into flatten the curves or protect the elderly and so on. And I got shadow banned. Multiple accounts got shadow banned on our platform. In any case, I just, this was where I started trolling. And then I guess my ex-girlfriend by now, about maybe not even a year back, told me I should get, well, she already started like longer than, like about 2 years ago, she started pushing me to go towards Twitter, roundabout when Musk took over it. And I did, and I guess I'm grateful now, because even though I'm just starting and I have like, what, 20 followers or something, it's still so much more informative. You don't have the censorship, you have the actual gore, like you see what's actually happening on the ground. And I also trolled a couple of people, and I also don't like blocking. On 9gag I had to, because it's just overwhelming and takes time. Yeah. But here's something that disappointed me. Maybe you can I'm just gonna throw it out, and you can pick up on that if you want. I had this intellectual hero. His name is David Deutsch, and he's a researcher, a quantum information theorist at Cambridge, I believe. Since I'm a physicist,
Would I have seen him? Does he do any of like the universe stuff or?
you might have seen him with Sam Harris, or you might
Okay.
have seen him on other podcasts.
The name sounds super familiar, and I watch Sam Harris content, so
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he was an intellectual hero of mine because his book, which is The Beginning of Infinity, it's an amazing book. I can just recommend it to you and your following if you wanna. Long story short, it's about, well, I can't do it justice, but one of the central tenets is epistemology. The right way of seeing things. There is such a thing as objectively good and objectively bad explanations, and I preface my whole Ukraine article with it, which is, just to sum it up, good explanations have three core things, which is one, they explain the phenomenon at hand, duh. Two, every single last element in the explanation is strictly necessary and cannot be altered. For example, you cannot add ad hoc elements like the stone fell down the mountain this way because the witch wanted it, because it doesn't explain anything. It just adds the witch's will on top of it, right? And finally, and this is the interesting part, it's not necessary, but usually a good explanation will have reach beyond the actual phenomenon at hand, right? And so if you apply this to the whole Ukraine conflict, it's fairly easy. So this good and bad explanation is just a neat reformulation of the scientific method, right? And I applied this to my article. So basically my article is recapping why we have war again, simultaneously dispelling the, 5 to maybe 6, 7 main tenets of the mainstream narrative. But in any case, to bring it back to David Deutsch, who is the author of that amazing book, he is one of those people where I'm just disillusioned again and again. We have someone who's super smart in one domain, has the right epistemology, and yet is so deeply mistaken and wrong in another domain. Another such person would be Robert Sapolsky, this brain person from Stanford, who also commented once about Ukraine, and he was like, yeah, this goes back to some medieval feuds between the different Slav tribes, and I'm like, But in any case, David Deutsch blocked me as we had a short exchange on Twitter, and just jump onto that. Do you have such similar stories of intellectual heroes that he's still in a way an intellectual hero because the book he wrote it, but it's just a shame to see him misapply his own epistemology like this.
Oh, let me think. I'm sure that there were some at the beginning. I was very disappointed. I don't have a lot that this is, I guess, I don't have a lot of people that I look up to. I've never been somebody, I've just never been like that. Like in sports, like I was never like, oh, I want to be like this athlete. I was never, I never had that thinking for whatever reason. It was always like, I want to be that athlete. Like I don't care what that athlete does. I like to watch them play. I like to learn from them, but I've never had like, I guess I just don't look up to people that I don't know particularly well. Like my whole thing is respect is earned sort of deal. Like and like even just from this short conversation, like I already respect you because of the intellectual positions you take and your ability to self-reflect and say that you're wrong and stuff like that. That garners a huge amount of respect from me. But in terms of people, I don't know. I was like with the Scott Ritter thing, I was a little disillusioned with him calling Gonzalo a SBU agent. I thought that was a very weird position to take. Scott wasn't my hero, but I guess that was one instance through this conflict. A lot of the actors, one thing I didn't understand was how liberal Hollywood was. I just didn't care at all in America. And when I say liberal, I don't mean like left on politics. I mean like the crazy aspect of American liberalism, the more cultural stuff.
So the American liberal, not the philosophical one.
Yes, American liberal. And then I saw all of these actors going to Ukraine when they knew nothing about Ukraine, nothing about the situation, just doing it for publicity. And I was like, what the hell is going on? And that really set me on the way to just completely discredit a large number of uh, influential people in the United States, at least. But I don't particularly, I guess, I don't know. You talk about these people that you look up to, and I just don't have a lot of them. I don't think.
Okay.
I look up to Lavrov, and I have not been
Ah,
disillusioned with
yeah,
Lavrov this entire conflict. He has done an amazing job.
indeed. Yeah, I don't particularly subscribe to this whole thing about a person being someone whom I look up to, but it
Yeah.
is useful to have these sources where you don't have to second guess every single statement they make, right?
Every single thing, yeah.
And I guess until now, David Deutsch was among the top ones, but what I still see out there is, I don't know if you know Brett Weinstein. He was very
Yes.
big during yeah, he's amazing. Like his mind, and well, he does it with his wife, but his mind, he hasn't, as far as I know, yet done anything about Ukraine. He's still seeking accountability for the whole COVID issue, which I'm totally aboard with. We need accountability. But his way of thinking is, I would say, virtually identical to mine. Like very, obviously keeps probably smarter and everything, but and better read. But I do have my, I guess, 200-ish books under my belt, and they keep growing. But yeah, just he's, I guess, in a way, he remains one of the stars out there whom I look up to intellectually, I
Yeah.
guess.
I think if something happened with Joe Rogan, I think that would probably hurt me. I don't listen to a lot of Joe Rogan. I don't listen to a lot of Joe Rogan, but he's one of those people that I've kind of built up in my brain as like somebody who's very open to ideas, very, he'll have anybody on his podcast. He doesn't care what people talk about. He has enough money now that he does not care about anything that has to do with him being influenced. He does not care. And he just promotes a good lifestyle for people. So if something, if he was on that Epstein list or something, I would have been.
Why can he have a taste of his own?
Hey,
Yeah, I see why you'd identify with him. You guys have the whole
yeah.
yeah.
I just he opened that comedy club up in Austin, Texas, and he pays these comics that are nobodies like $500 a set. He's like a comedy communist. He's really supporting that entire group of people who work for like pennies on the dollar, basically, when they're trying to come up in the comedy world. So, even after he's been successful, he's made millions of dollars off of his Spotify deal and all of this, he's still, trying to give back. And I just think
Awesome.
he's like an actual real human being compared to, some of the other people that are in the limelight that just don't seem like real people.
Totally. Awesome. Well, this brings me back, I guess, to let's make this the last question. We can wrap it up for now. Maybe we can have another one if you're down, another episode. All right. So this thing which you just mentioned about Joe Rogan actually segues into that last question of mine, which is, say, 3 years down the line, you find yourselves with a couple million subscribers, right? Something happens and then you explode, right? You start getting invited into conferences, you start getting invited to TV shows, and eventually you get offered your own position in mainstream media.
Yeah.
Like, how much would the pay have to be, or just quite generally, do you think you'll be able to keep your soul, or will you sell out your integrity?
Oh, what's the number?
Maybe not what's the number, but knowing yourself, right? Do you
Yeah.
think you might sell out your integrity just because you enjoy
No,
everything?
I would get fired so fast from any. I would read something and I'd go, what? I'm not saying this. This is nonsense. I can't defend positions that I mean, I can in an argumentative sense. I can defend a position that I don't believe in, a devil's advocate sort of thing. But there's no way I could go out and promote a position like it's my position if I did not believe in it. There's just no way I could do that. I would probably just rather die, honestly. I couldn't.
All right. Not even if you get pivoted to something you care less about. Like you get to keep defending your position, you get to keep debating. However, it wouldn't be geopolitics no more. It would be, say, LGBTQ.
So are you saying that I are you saying that I get it put into a position of media and I'm defending? So it's not geopolitics, but
It's
I'm
not
defending
geopolitics. You
that I
cannot
don't
talk
like.
about geopolitics. You're sort of forbidden, like tacitly forbidden.
Okay.
You get to keep debating, but it's not that which is your core interest, which is like geopolitics, Ukraine, military history, and so on.
I mean, I don't think that. Oh man, I had millions of subscribers, and I was not, and I was set, and I got offered a position, but I had to give up. No, I don't know if I would do it.
All right.
I don't know. I also I'm so anti pop culture politics. Like I can't get into culture wars. Like Jackson Hinkle is always getting into culture wars. And I just don't know how people do it. Like I can't argue about LGBTQ. I can't argue about a lot of this stuff. Geopolitics is very like it's like this kind of like it's all over the place. It's chaos, but at least there's some like goals. You have national interests. You have this sort of stuff. When it
Structure.
comes, yeah, when it comes to like domestic politics, first off, I don't think any of it really matters at all. I think it's a really good way to keep masses very distracted with each other.
You're talking
Again,
US or
like,
everywhere?
everywhere, but particularly in the US, the media often uses all of these random, events or happenings to distract the population and keep them arguing from the real issues that are at
Indeed.
hand, which is more in the geopolitical and economic,
Exactly.
but that stuff is boring. So it's much more fun to talk about tearing down statues and men playing in female sports and black versus white in the US is a huge thing. Even though if you look at like statistics, the blacks, like African Americans and white people in America don't really come into contact with each other that much. Like in terms of like crime and like hate crimes and assaults and stuff, like black on Asian, black Mexican on black, that's a lot higher than like, but the whole focus is like neo-Nazis in America, which is like I don't know if you've seen very many neo-Nazis in America, but there's just not a ton of them. Like considering we have 310 million people in this country, honest neo-Nazis, not far right individuals. That kind of gets a little gray area, but like tattoos of swastikas and stuff. That's not a huge issue in the United States. We don't have the Ku Klux Klan anymore. We don't have like that sort of stuff. And so all of that is just a way to keep, in my personal opinion, Americans fighting over the things that they should not be fighting over, while ignoring the things that they should be very, very concerned about. Like the housing market right now in the United States is in a very untenable position. Geopolitically, we are losing in, the Red Sea, we're losing there. Israel is losing in Gaza and potentially about to invade northern Lebanon. And I don't mean losing like they're losing the war, losing like the outcome that is being achieved in Gaza is not the outcome that Israel needed. We're losing in Ukraine, in my personal opinion. We are being bullied by Iran. I mean, a U.S. military base in Iraq was just struck with ballistic missiles that were provided by Iran to Iranian militias in Iraq, or potentially from Iran directly. Do you think 1991 United States would have dealt with that?
Oh no.
Like at all, right? And so we just appear so weak everywhere. And what we're arguing about is what gender dysphoria is okay. Like,
Well, let me just push back on that last statement before we wrap it up.
yeah, for sure.
Because when I did the research for the whole neocon article, which is my second article where I do this whole psychology thing, combining it with realism, I dedicate a full several page long paragraph just to the neocon thinking, and I anchor it with the personality traits in psychology and also anthropologically, where evolutionarily speaking these mindsets would probably come from, right? And the whole culture of honor thing, the feuds where if you kill one of mine, I gotta kill 10 of yours, and so on, the whole vengeful cycle which never ends of violence. And the thing is, I don't think you look weak, remember how Turkey shut down the Russian plane?
Look weak where? What are we talking about specifically?
I don't think the US or any global actor looks weak by not retaliating. On the contrary, I think the whole retaliation.
I don't think that the U.S. doesn't look weak for not retaliating and escalating. That's not where I see the weakness.
Okay.
I do not see the weakness from Russia not escalating when they get hit. This has been a common thing. I'm not saying that they need to go out and level Iran because they got hit with ballistic missiles.
Yeah, then we're on the same page.
The U.S. wants to go do that. The weakness comes from the fact that they aren't able to project their power in the region like they were 30 years ago. Okay. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, the weakness is not from a lack of action based off of an event, especially because I don't believe that immediate retaliation or escalation is ever the way that you deal with these issues. If you look at the way the Russians have dealt with things, they get slapped in the face all the time with these deep strikes. They lose ships. But if it doesn't change the war, is it worth changing the war for the Russians, right? If the Russians know what's going on in Ukraine, if the way I believe things are going, the Russians are winning. Why would they add a new stimulus to this situation when they're already ahead? Right. Yeah. This is part of the thing when they talk about striking decision-making centers, power grid strikes, decapitation, removing the regime. Zelensky is god awful in foreign diplomacy. His government is fucking terrible at it, right? They're horrible. Why would you remove somebody who's making your job easier?
Yeah.
Right.
Also, is not the smartest.
Unless you wanted the war to end and you thought that that was the way that you could accomplish that, then maybe. But I don't think Russia thinks this war is ending if they get rid of Zelensky. In fact, if they get rid of Zelensky, they could potentially allow the U.S. to put somebody, I believe it would be the U.S., to put somebody into power that would be actually competent and understand what's going on instead of, the cokehead who's an actor, comedian, who ran on a peace platform but is pushing for war. I mean, the domestic situation in Ukraine is going to begin to rapidly deteriorate. They can't even get the mobilization started, right? The 500,000 mobilized that they talked about. They don't have the means to do it. Their commissars, they purged everybody during the last. They purged all of their mobilization commissars. So there's no benefit to escalating in Ukraine, even though the Russian population would be fine with it, right? That Russia has an open door to escalate any way they want domestically. They'll have approval, but they're not going to, because why change a situation when you're ahead?
Yeah, why indeed? I was going to close it with that, but that opened up a little curious part in me.
Go ahead. I'm all about it. I love long conversations.
You mentioned that, how do I best formulate this? So you mentioned the whole idea about Zelensky might get replaced with someone competent, someone smart, someone, educated and more strategic in his outlook, right?
I think that the person that would replace Zelensky, I've always said the next president of Ukraine would be Bundanov, because Bundanov is
Budanov.
Yeah, Budanov. Sorry.
No
I never hear these names. I only ever read them. So if I mess them up,
I'm from Bulgaria, so I more or less know the phonetics in there.
Oh, okay. I've always thought that he would be the person that would be propped up because he is already in the pocket, right? He's head of the internal security, so he has all of those connections. He runs basically the internal workings of the country from a security standpoint, which is a huge advantage. Usually when coups happen,
wait, just to clarify, Budanov is the chief of the security services, right? Like the CIA. Is the SBU like the CIA or what?
Yeah, it's like the FSB in Russia.
Okay, yeah, go on.
Yeah, so like the CIA, but also not. It's like the FBI and the CIA kind of combined.
Okay, foreign and domestic.
Yeah, they act wherever they want. The CIA is not supposed to act within the territorial borders of the United States.
That wasn't even. I was going to go to the question unless you want to finish that thought.
Yeah. And I was just going to say, I believe that he's going to be put in because he is somebody who is competent. He is somebody who is listening to the West. He will do what they ask. Whereas Zelensky, there seems to be this constant like battering, right?
The little
Where
kid.
Zelensky is being torn between internal politics and foreign pressure. And so he's trying to actually he's actually trying to be a politician, and that's not what is needed, in my personal opinion, in Ukraine right now. You need a hardliner who's going to follow exactly what the West wants to achieve all of the Western support that Ukraine needs. Whereas Zelensky says a lot of things to a lot of people that piss a lot of people off, particularly like China and Saudi Arabia. A lot of the people who are a part of like the negotiations and the Ukraine peace deal and whatever, they're always getting undermined and slandered behind their backs at these things. I think in this last one, he said something pretty racy about the Chinese. So, yeah.
It wasn't racy. It was just that he did not deem the foreign minister of China to be on his level, and he wanted to speak to the president because the president. Yeah, just another insult. Doesn't matter.
Which, by the way, Zelensky is not on Xi's level.
Oh, he's not on.
Xi doesn't even go. Xi barely even goes and sees Putin. Xi is like, he never goes anywhere. So yeah, the fact that you got a foreign minister is a pretty big deal.
Indeed. Yeah, they had also a huge entourage in Davos. So
Yeah.
I have been to Davos a couple of times because my ex was from there, and they get so annoyed, the inhabitants there, when everything gets closes down because of security and so on. But that's another topic. So let me go back to that question of mine, which is, you mentioned that Zelensky, this little puppet leader, could be replaced by someone actually more competent, who better listens to the West, and who has more of a strategic vision and doesn't just try to hold every last inch by expending insane amounts of manpower and equipment.
Yes.
And so I guess it's a rather personal question. Can you even, because I have this, can you enjoy movies? Or do you have the same critique as I do, where you hate it that the evil guys are clearly evil? They always come in hordes and hordes of completely uncontrolled little minions, and there's nowhere someone who actually strategizes, gets intel, uses it, and right? At least on blockbusters.
It's this cliche where your adversary is incompetent and negligent, but somehow he rose to extreme power and became a villain.
Yeah.
Like, it works in superhero movies because you get a superpower and you can be evil. But when it comes to like actual like James Bond villains and stuff like that, no, those movies are when I watch movies just in general, I usually am making jokes the entire time, picking them apart because I hate unrealistic situations arising in movies. And I don't mean like an asteroid hitting Earth. I mean like somebody saying something that no human would ever say in a situation. Like, that is so frustrating to me. And particularly war movies and stuff like that, I can't, man. Watching people shoot, like, this is just a minutia thing, but watching people shoot from not behind like defilade.
Yeah.
They're getting
And they
shot
stand and they don't even go.
It is unbelievable, dude. Have you ever been shot at? Because I've been shot at, and that is scary as hell, dude. It is not. It is not something that you want to have done. It's just
You've been shot at? Well, we'll have to keep that for another episode, I guess, that you've been shot
yes,
at.
in one of my previous lines of work, I did a lot of firearms training and a lot of stuff like that. So yeah, when you get shot at,
you mean high school?
No, after high school. Yeah, there you go. After high school, fortunately, keep those fingers crossed. But yeah, I don't see how removing any aspect of Ukrainian leadership right now is going to be beneficial to the West. You already have, I mean, beneficial to Russia. You already have massive infighting, and that is just what you want during a war. Is you want political leaders making military decisions. I think that is one of the single most important aspects. Is Zelensky is going into Avdiivka, which, why the hell are you going to a frontline city? The only reason he went there was to bolster morale, to hold the city at any cost.
Yeah.
That's lunacy. That's 1945 bunker stuff right there. Like, not retreating from any place to keep up this PR thing is working in the Russian advantage. Now, I would say at the beginning, I don't think that the goal was the capitulation of Ukraine and regime change, or possibly regime change, but maybe soft regime change, policy change, hopefully, instead of regime change. But now I think that the Russian goal is much more maximum in Ukraine.
Ambitious. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was a hell of a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on, Scott. So
sure.
I guess I'll link your Telegram and your YouTube channel. And if you have any other links, send them to me. I'm going to link them in the description.
Yeah, just my
And,
Telegram and my YouTube.
Perfect. And I hope we'll hear from each other again and then maybe have another one.
Yeah, and I need to have you on my podcast as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott.
Right.
Have a nice evening and see ya.